but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you.
Good morning all, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and a little bit later than usual, but a review of Eddie Howe's press conference for the game today, 5:30 kickoff at St James's Park against West Ham United in the Premier League. And first up, as always, it seems, at the press conferences yesterday was Matthew Raisbeck from BBC Radio Newcastle. And he was asking Eddie how important it was to not let the cup semi-final success affect the league games, the Premier League games. And would it be difficult for him? Would it be difficult for the players? First of all, Eddie Howe said it wouldn't be difficult for him because, you know, basically from his perspective, as soon as that game finished against Southampton the other night, he was focusing on West Ham, preparation for the West Ham Premier League game. He says it might be more difficult for the players. He said because ultimately it was a late finish against Southampton. It's a nighttime game. You know, he says by the time you've been in, you got changed, you got showered, changed, you've had a little bit of downtime, and then you get home. It's quite late at night, and then you've got to get back in. You've got to refocus on the job in hand, which is getting yourself ready for the next game. He said from his point of view, definitely not difficult, but from the players, they need to focus. And he says his team, everybody involved at the club have been, working very hard behind the scenes to make sure that, that they don't get too carried away, they don't get complacent. And, he said, not for the first time in the press conference, that West Ham are a good team, that this is a difficult test, and that, from his perspective, they'll need, to be focused, when the game kicks off, and not let the standards slip. So yeah, all focus on that. And it was, it was no surprise to hear him again say that West Ham are a big test. Bruno was next on Matthew's question list, asked how much Newcastle United would miss the midfielder. He just said, look, he's done massively well for us. And, he will, of course, be a big miss. But he said it is an opportunity for the team as a whole to regroup. And, he pointed out a positive in the sense that Bruno, of course, will be available for the final. But he did, again, on, for the first time, but not for the last time, emphasize that, this would be an opportunity for somebody to come in and make it difficult for him. Take the bull by the horns and have this opportunity, get in the team and see what happens. Razor then asked about West Ham's form this season. Was he surprised after, having a couple of seasons where they were up the top, competing for European slots, that they now find themselves struggling at the other end of the table? And Eddie said, look, it can happen to any team at any time. He says sometimes, in this Premier League, when, you make a difficult start with form, it's sometimes really difficult to get out of it. And, West Ham have been going through that this season. But, again, emphasized that doesn't mean that it's an easy game. West Ham are going to be coming up here and making it difficult for Newcastle United. Make no mistake about that. He was then asked about Isak's head injury. First of all, Eddie praised Isak for what he called a vital contribution in the match, because obviously Ward-Prowse was, in a dangerous position with a free kick, and, Isak took his place in the wall, and he just said that, obviously he took, the full ball, in his head. He admitted that it was slight concussion, and couldn't give an answer as to whether he will be available. Now, a lot of debate about this within the media, within the fan base, because obviously as soon as you say there's concussion, you think, well, that's, automatically takes him out of the game. So maybe let his guard slip a little bit with that one, Eddie, by saying he had slight concussion. And the protocol, of course, is, he'll miss this game. I would be very surprised if Isak is playing today. Asked about Gordon and Ashby, of course, the two new signings, and basically just said, look, they're both available for this game. They both trained very well, although they hadn't managed to train with the full team so far. They trained within small groups. But yes, both are available for this coming match today. He then pushed him on Ashby because obviously a lot of talk in and around the media has been about Gordon signing for Newcastle, and Ashby hasn't had the spotlight on him as much. And asked why he chased Ashby, because it was reported in the media that ultimately Newcastle United had been pursuing Ashby for at least 2 windows. He said that he's got huge potential. He's athletically very good, very skillful, and obviously they are always looking to the future to improve the squad. He said Manquillo at the moment has currently got an injury, so it leaves us slightly short in that department, because Emil Kraft, of course, is also still carrying that long-term injury. And he said he's got a great mentor in Kieran Trippier. Trippier, of course, number one choice in that position, but he just said, it's a win-win for us as a club. Ashby coming in, young potential, and can learn off one of the very, very best in the world. So, yeah, answered that question quite simply. Keith Downey was next up from Sky, asking really about the situation with midfielders. Obviously, with Bruno now suspended, John Joe Shelby leaving the club. Are we light in midfield? Eddie used this opportunity to big up Elliot Anderson, and I expected this, to be honest, because he hasn't gone out on loan, and he has had opportunities, but albeit when the team has been changed. Sheffield Wednesday, prime example. Too many players were changed, and it's very difficult to shine. If he's got confidence in him, there's going to have to be an opportunity for him at some point, and lo and behold, this is it. So he said, we've got Elliot Anderson. He said that others who can play in the position. He says, but ultimately, because Bruno was suspended for 3 games, 3 Premier League games, we've got to adjust. So that was his first mention, really, of Elliot Anderson. Keith then asked him about Chelsea's spending in the window. Obviously, we've covered it on NUFC Matters, but over £600 million has been spent by the pensioners. And it's certainly got people scratching their heads when Newcastle are so strict with financial fair play, yet Chelsea seem to be playing monopoly football. He just was asked if he had an opinion about it, and he said not really, because it's difficult to have an opinion when you don't know what the circumstances are at a particular football club behind the scenes. He said, I know what the situation is with regards to us. I can have an opinion on that, but with regards to Chelsea, it's very difficult to have an opinion. Keith continued on the same vein, asking him how difficult it was to compete with, the likes of Chelsea spending that kind of money. And Eddie just referred to his managerial career by saying, I've never used finances as an excuse. This club is different to Bournemouth, and, every club has its own way of doing things in its own, financial, situations. So, he just said that at this moment in time, he's very happy at Newcastle and very happy with the situation he finds himself in. So, yeah, I wasn't sure what Keith was trying to get at with those questions, but, Eddie answered them as Eddie does. Andy Sixsmith was up next, and this fact really surprised me. He basically congratulated him on today being Eddie's 600th game as a manager. Wow, 600 games. And as Andy says, it's at such a young age. So congratulated him on the feat, and also asked him what his thoughts were. And he said, it seems like a lot more. But, I think it has surprised Eddie as well. I'm not sure that he looks at stats like this on a regular basis. He said that it's gone very quickly, the actual time as manager at the clubs that he's been at has gone very quickly. But from his perspective, he's loved every minute of it, and he wouldn't change anything. And the fact that, his past has led to where he is now, backs that up, that he genuinely, wouldn't change anything that he'd done. Andy then asked him, where did Tuesday rank in achievements in his time as manager? And he said he hadn't had much time to think about it. And again, he then asked him about, what he did on Tuesday night. Did he go home to celebrate with the family? And he said, well, I didn't get home till 1 o'clock. All of the family were in bed. He says, but the dog was up. And he said the dog didn't greet me that well. But he said he was tired. He went straight to bed. And he says, I went to bed thinking about West Ham. So, it's a simple answer to a simple question from Eddie on that occasion. Andy then said the city is buzzing, and rightly so. How do you harness that? How do you control the emotions? How, again, a bit similar to the question that Ray had asked about, how do you keep people's feet on the ground? How do you stop the complacency? How do you stop the team getting carried away and potentially, going into the game against West Ham thinking, well, we're in a cup final now, so the rest of the season doesn't matter. And he just said, look, I'm blessed really with this group of players. He said this group of players understands what the job in hand is. They are committed to what we are doing, to what we're trying to achieve. And they know that if we drop our levels at any time, then, we're going to struggle. So it was good to hear that, and again, it was part and parcel of yesterday's press conference that we're not going to rest on our laurels. I think Toon Stato last night had said on the Amigos that, Newcastle, after the last two semi-final wins in 98 and 99, went on to lose subsequent league games. So Eddie Howe, again, probably won't be aware of that stat, but he won't want it to, he won't want to go down the same road. He likes to do things differently. So it was good to hear that not only are the coaching staff committed, but the team are as well. Andy then mentioned the elephant in the room about Callum Wilson. No goals in 11 games. But he did ask it in a particular way. He said, is he at his best when people doubt him? And it gave Eddie that out on what could have been a difficult question. And he simply said that, look, Callum thrives on pressure and the big moments. And again, re-emphasised what he said last week, that as long as Callum Wilson delivers for the team, then I will always back him. And again, re-emphasised that he will always back Callum Wilson to score. All goal scorers, essentially do go through these kind of runs. So, it's no surprise to hear Eddie, backing Callum Wilson. And we don't have a massive amount of options. Let's face it, with Bruno out today, and with Isak, I would say, unlikely to feature, then a lot of emphasis is on Wilson. And somebody mentioned to me today, I don't watch Callum Wilson's podcast, but he apparently does one with Antonio. And apparently they have a bet on today that whoever scores, if either do score, they're going to run up to each other and celebrate in each other's faces. Let's hope they've told the team that, and let's hope the fans realise there could be a bit of an adverse reaction if one person goes and does that. Certainly get featured on Match of the Day and Sky tonight, I think. Andy also mentioned Anthony Gordon. He said, from his perspective, sitting in the press box, he says Gordon really did look in awe of the crowd when he walked onto the pitch with Harrison Ashby the other day. He asked how did he think he would cope with that? Would he be able to use that, as something to draw on when he eventually gets on the pitch? And he said, look, Anthony Gordon is perfect for this kind of atmosphere at St James's Park. And then Eddie referred to the game at Everton, which I was at last season, where he said, look, the atmosphere at Everton was red hot when we were there, and he copes fine. He buzzed off that. So he feels that Gordon will tune in and channel into the support that he gets from the terraces at St James's Park, and yeah, it'll benefit him massively. Andy then pointed to a story that was in the papers about somebody who is expecting their first child on the day of the cup final and the Newcastle win. They're going to have an abbreviated version of his name used for the name of the child. I believe it was a young girl, and they're going to have an abbreviated version of Eddie's name to use, and he found that really funny. He couldn't believe it, to be honest. He clearly hadn't seen the story, but he did laugh at that. Next up was Nisha from the BBC, and she was keen to know, was Eddie happy at this moment in time with the players that haven't featured as much this season, the likes of Elliot Anderson, I guess, who haven't had much first team football. Are they ready to step in? Should they be required? Should they be needed in the next set of fixtures? Clearly, this is on everyone's mind with Bruno now being suspended for 3 matches. He said, yeah, as a player, you need to be fit first and foremost, but you need to be in tune with, what is expected of you if you come onto the pitch in that position. And, he said it's up to the players to maintain their levels of fitness, maintain the professionalism, maintain the understanding of what we're trying to achieve. It's our job to make sure that they are getting the right advice and training, etc. But he says ultimately it's down to the players to take that chance when they get it, then to make his job difficult when he's picking the team. And he just finished that bit off really by saying that, from the training sessions, that the club have, they have all, they've all essentially, maintained the standard. And that's great to hear, because it is difficult. If you're an ASM, if you're an Elliot Anderson, and, you can't get into a winning team, it must be difficult to focus. And I know these people are getting paid a lot of money, but it's good to hear that, the players are. And I think we've seen it when players have come on. Jacob Murphy, for example, comes on, always gives 100%, always seems to know what he's doing. And I just think, it is good to hear. Nisha then moved on to ASM. She said, how does he respond to this particular situation that he finds himself in, not being able to get into the team? Eddie's answered this in a roundabout way over the last few weeks. He just said, look, he's been good in training. He understands the situation that I found myself in. The team keeps winning. It's very difficult to change a winning team. But he did say that, ASM, in the conversations that he's had with him, understands this. And he said he's also keen, to show his talents off when he comes on. And Eddie finished off by just saying, look, he loves him as a player and he loves him as a person. So, no doubt that Howe is very good at man management. He is certainly trying to get the best out of the SM whenever he steps onto the pitch in a black and white shirt, and rightly so. You wouldn't expect anything different from that. Nisha then said, she started talking about football's highs and lows. So, essentially winning the game of football against Southampton, winning the semi-final, qualifying for the final, but then losing Bruno for 3 games after the sending off. She was asking how he deals with that, and he said, look, football management is never dull. And for me, I'm used to it now. You do get highs, you do get lows, and, it's how you manage them personally. But he said he always tries to make the right decisions, and, he'll continue with these same methods and moves. She also asked if he'd had a chat with the owners after the semi-final. He said he had a brief chat with Amanda and Mirdad, and he'd had a few conversations by phone with others. Damien was next up. He said he was interested to know whether Eddie Howe's young children had been caught up by all the excitement. He said, by all accounts, they had a late night. He says, and they are Toon fans. He says, so yes, they are very excited. He said, but they're excited for Wembley, not Wembley. He says one of the youngsters is struggling to say Wembley properly, so he calls it Wembley, which caused a little bit of humour and mirth in the press room. Damien followed it up with, have you got to keep their feet on the ground about the final? He went, no, they've got West Ham in mind, which I thought was brilliant. And of course, it caused again a lot of laughter in the press room. Next up was Scott from the Northern Echo, and he was saying, who's going to be in. He's never going to answer that for Bruno. ESM. He was talking about ESM and Anthony being in direct competition. Anthony Gordon being in direct competition for a place. He just said that competition is healthy. You need that kind of. You need that kind of competition within a squad, and that's what they're trying to achieve across the board. And he's with ESM, he more or less gave us a little bit more about why ESM hasn't been in the squad, why he hasn't been in the best of form, and Scott was pushing him a little bit more about how big is the second half of the season for ESM, and he just said, look, it's huge for him. It's huge for him. It's huge for us. He reiterated something that he'd said last week, which is that ESM is physically in the best place at the moment. He's injured his hamstring not once but twice. So hence the reason that there's been a few issues and a few delays in maintaining, getting back to his best form. But he said he looks, in recent training sessions, he's looked great. And again, he just reiterated that there's competition for places. So one would imagine, having listened to that ESM will start. It'll be a simple change, won't be too many changes today, but ESM, I would imagine, will be in. Joe Linton dropping back, Wilson up front as the target man. Miggy and Joe Linton was next on Scott's list. And again, he was saying, look, those two players in particular put the work rate in, the graft, the track back. He then just said, look, ESM doesn't really do that. So how do you get the best out of him for the team when a player doesn't perhaps bring what some other players do? And Eddie was very coy and very clever again. He just said, look, there is no better player than Allan can do what he does. And he said he is unique. He said people in the team have to give him the ball in the right places, and he then, when he gets the ball, has to do what he does best. He said Eddie does then continue to say that he does want wide men to graft, but he said it's never down to one person. He said it's a team effort, and defenders defend, yes, but the team defends as a unit, and you attack and you defend as a unit, you're not going to go far wrong. So he was, Scott was trying to get a bit of I don't think he was trying to get a negative story, but I just think there was a little push there from Scott about ESM. He doesn't bring what, it's what a lot of fans think. He comes on, he's a maverick, he'll score one good goal in 10, he'll have one good performance in 10, but he gets people up, he's exciting, and it is a conundrum with ESM. But I think what was right, and the questions that were asked yesterday were right. It is a big second half the season for ESM, and I think the lads in the press and the lasses in the press room got the answer that they wanted. Craig Hope was next from the Daily Mail. He said we started the transfer window with 6 midfielders. He said we finished the window with 5, and we finished the semi-final with 4. He says, from his perspective, he says, first of all, he says, just correct us on my maths if I'm wrong. Where Eddie says, there's nothing wrong with your maths. But, he said, look, is it an area? Again, it's a question was asked in a completely different way earlier on. Is it an area he's concerned about? And he just admitted that losing John Joe Shelby was a concern. And, it was something which came completely left field. They couldn't predict it. And it was disappointing for him, but completely understand why he wanted to go and why the club were happy to let him go. He did admit, look, as we all know, Newcastle were active in the transfer market, brought in 2 players, and they were actively looking for a centre midfield player, a creative or a defensive midfielder, whatever. They were looking for a midfield player. Unfortunately, they didn't get one. He then reiterated what he said earlier about Elliot Anderson. He says, we've got Elliot Anderson and other players who could come in and fill the gap, because ultimately the Bruno suspension has come at a really bad time with 3 big Premier League games before the final. He said, obviously, the one good thing is that Bruno is back for the final. But he reiterated that Elliot Anderson, the reason he hadn't gone out on loan is because they've got faith in them. They believe that ultimately he can, make a career at Newcastle. So it was good to hear that. And he also emphasised the fact that he's a local lad, and we've seen some success stories, over the years, at the club with local lads. And yeah, Elliot Anderson hopefully will be the next one. Craig asked him about Paqueta. He said, was it ever close? Of course, Bruno's good friend, Brazilian international. Was that a deal that was ever close? Was he ever close to pulling on the black and white of Newcastle? He went, it was never close. It's a player that I admire greatly. And, he is an experienced, talented player. He said he gives West Ham something totally different to what they had. And he said that him and Declan Rice have formed a really good partnership, and that they'll have to watch them very carefully on Saturday night. He was then asked by Craig about his meeting with Idris Elba. Of course, the actor was at St James's Park for the semi-final as guests of the directors. He said, I didn't get any opportunities to ask him about his acting career. He said it was very short and sweet, but it was a nice opportunity to meet him. Luke Edwards was next, and he just said, is this situation that you find yourself in, qualifying for a cup final, is this the biggest test of collective mentality for you and for the squad? And he basically said, Luke, yeah, I can't disagree with you on that at all. It's a good way of putting it. And Luke took the plaudits. He then says, for me though, it's all about focusing on the next game. And that's not hard for me to do that. He said the game against West Ham is the type of game that if we do drop our focus, if we do drop our concentration, our work rate levels, then, we could come a crop at it. We need to concentrate. And again, this was the theme throughout the press conference, that Newcastle United do need to, keep up the work rate, keep the wits about them, and, do the job in hand, stay professional. Luke then said, am I right in saying the big clubs can do this, season in, season out, qualify for finals and then qualify for semi-finals, whatever, and concentrate on the league? And he went, yeah. He said, 100%. If you want to be the best, if you want to be a big club, then this is what you have to do. You have to follow up a semi-final win with a professional performance in a league game and get the points on the board. And, he says, that's what we expect as coaches of this club. And, he says, we're not getting carried away. We expect that the players will come in and do what they've been doing all season and carry on in the same vein. So, yeah, good stuff. Ian Murtagh next from the Daily Star. And he was asking him whether he was concerned about potentially players wanting to play in the cup final, pulling out of challenges maybe in the next 3 games that we'll have before we're at Wembley. And he went, no, I'm not concerned about that. He said, I could never do that personally as a player. And he said, I don't think any of my players will do that, because they all appreciate that Premier League points, are important. So, he said, Ian pushed him a little bit and said, would you be keeping an eye? And he went, of course I'll be keeping an eye on that, and if I felt that anybody was doing something in those, in that way or whatever, then, I would obviously take them to one side and would talk about it. So yeah, he's not expecting that, but interesting question for Ian to ask. He also said, you've got 3 weeks till Wembley, 3 games till Wembley. Are places in the team still up for grabs? And yeah, he just said, look, of course, he says, of course, there's opportunities for people, to be the ones wearing the black and white shirts and that 1 to 11 going down the tunnel at Wembley. He said it's an opportunity for someone, at some point. You just don't know what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks. You haven't got a crystal ball. Who could have predicted that we would lose Bruno over 3 games now, and leading up to the cup final. But yeah, he just said places are up for grabs, and people will have to maintain the levels of performances. And again, just asking about Ian asking about ASM and Anderson, and that seemed to be a theme of the press conference yesterday. About them potentially getting places in the team and holding those positions. And he said, look, all players have got that opportunity. They all have the same vision. They've all just got to keep training and playing well, and the rest will take care of itself. Jordan Cronin was next. Photographs, of course, were released from the club, from the training session of Matt Targett, back training. And he asked how he was doing. He said, well, he's running again. He's back on grass, which is always a good sign. It was a positive report about Matt Targett. Jordan asked about Manquillo and how he'd sustained an injury, which is now obviously keeping him out of the squad. He said it was a weird injury. He took a ball on the end of his foot, which in turn had twisted his knee. He's been back to Spain. He's had a couple of injections, but he's not expected to be out for too long. Jordan also asked about Emil Kraft being named in the 25-man squad. Did that mean that we might see Emil Kraft before the end of the season? And he said, look, it's a very, very slim chance that he will, but you never know. Kieran was next. Just a lot of publicity about John Joe Shelby, of course, being back in the area and on the pitch saying his goodbyes. Chris Wood was what Kieran was asking about, just asking if he'd been back to say his farewells to the players. And he went, yeah, he came back. He came to see me in the office, which was really nice. And he says, and then he went to see the lads in the changing rooms with John Joe and had a proper goodbye. He said it just shows, essentially how popular Chris Wood was, as was John Joe Shelby, popular player in the dressing room. Kieran also asked if the summer window was on his and people behind the scenes minds, and had they selected some players that they may be looking at. And he said, look, we always have an idea. We always have ideas about players that would like to bring in to make the squad better, but that can change and plans do change. And he says, we have got things in our mind, but we always need to be prepared to be reactive if a situation happens. Prime example, of course, John Joe Shelby. They've lost a midfielder there who they probably thought they would have had till the end of the season, so didn't manage to get a midfielder in. But yeah, these things happen. So yeah, summer window is already in Newcastle United's mind. Miles Starford from the Shields Gazette asked a very simple question and got a very simple answer. Is Elliot Anderson ready to start a Premier League game? Eddie said from a physical point of view, yes. He's had a few niggly muscle injuries, but he's over them now. We're seeing the best of him in training, but mentally he's really focused and he's driven. So certainly, it looks as if Anderson is ready to start a Premier League game. Me personally, I think it'll be a simple ASM in, Joe Linton drop back, Wilson up front. But I think Anderson will feature, and he'll start to feature a little bit more over these next couple of games. Miles asked him again about Isak, which would already had an answer at the start of the press conference. He changed his answer this time round. Just said, he's been around the club. He looks fine. There was no mention of concussion. So I just found that weird yesterday. I just think, yeah, he looked fine and he's been training fine, etc. But I think as soon as the word concussion is mentioned in and around a game, I think that's it. I think it's, the decision's done. And I think they would have known on Tuesday night that he would miss probably today's game. But again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert on this. It's my opinion, but that's my thoughts anyway. Lee Ryder asked if Anderson had been knocking on his door about getting in the team. He just said no, he hasn't. We do have regular meetings, as I do with all players. But yeah, he just said no, he hadn't been knocking on the door. He then pushed on about Anderson, saying you could have loaned him out, you didn't. does that mean he's a step closer to the first team and, breaking through? He said, look, yeah, I could have loaned him out, but I didn't, because we've got a lot of faith in him. We believe in him. We know now that he needs a run in the team to be able to show what he can do. So in answer to Lee's question, he went, yeah, I do feel like this could be, this could be it. This could be his opportunity. So it sounds as if Elliot Anderson is certainly going to feature a bit more in these next 3 games. Lee then went on to Longstaff, the other local lad, of course, who got 2 goals against Southampton in the semi-final. And, he was asking, have you been working on this on the training ground with Sean? Because obviously goal scoring is something which he's not been able to do on a regular basis. And he said he didn't want to take credit for it. He just said, look, it's something we've been working on with all midfielders, including Sean. Sean's been putting in extra time and effort. And, it's great to see 2 really good finishers as they were. He said it was a great moment for us, great moment for him. And, let's hope it's the start of more goals. Lee then asked him about rival clubs not willing to sell to Newcastle. And he said, it's your words, not mine. But I do think that kind of situation is potentially difficult. So he opened up a little bit about it. He says it depends on the player and the club, that we go for. So admission there really from the first time, in my reckoning, that, Newcastle are going to struggle with some teams, Chelsea being the team. Jay Turner Cook to Tranmere was Lee's last question. He said, how did that come about? And are you happy with that? And he just said, yeah. He said, look, Tranmere are a good club. They've got a good manager. It's a great opportunity for Jay Turner Cook to go to Tranmere to, enjoy the experience, to play games, to go to a club, to train with them. And, he agreed with Lee that, much like Elliot Anderson had done under the management of Joey Barton, he'd flourished. So they're hoping that Jay Turner Cook will go out, do that, and come back a better player for Newcastle United. So very happy with that. Martin was next. He was pushing the fact that Chelsea wouldn't do business with Newcastle. Did those clubs see Newcastle as a threat? And he said, yeah, look, I've answered it. We are viewed differently now. We are viewed as a threat. So again, admission from Eddie that, it's not going to be as easy to deal with some teams as it is others. He was also asked about, do you coach different parts of the team in different ways? He said back 5, but he was corrected by Eddie saying, back 4, but he just said, do you coach different units? And yeah, we do. We do coach the strikers. We do coach the defenders. We do coach the midfielders. And that's just the way that's the way we do things. You know what I mean? He also was asked about, the record that, Pope and the defenders have got this season. And, he heaped praise on them, just saying, at the start of the season, when you're building a team, you're not sure what your 11 is going to be like, but ultimately, we've managed to find a recipe for success. So he's very happy about that. He was asked about Wilson's mental strength by Martin as well. Is that a huge part of his game? And he went, yeah, look, without doubt, that's probably his biggest asset. When you're going on a run like this, you do need to be mentally strong. And yeah, he just agreed with Martin on that. Jacob was next. He said Pope has finally conceded, but is he the same keeper that you saw at Burnley that you wanted to sign, or has he developed under the guidance of yourself and your coaches? Again, Eddie doesn't like to heap self-praise on himself, and who does, but he just said, look, he's the same keeper, but I think his shot stopping's been excellent this season. He's very agile. He's made a great impression as a player, but also in the dressing room. And he's molding into our way of goalkeeping. So, he's very happy with Nick Pope, and of course he should be. He was asked about his international potential as well. Jacob saying that potentially that it was his distribution, his feet that, probably didn't get him in the England team. And he just said, look, we work on all areas with our goalkeepers. And for me, Eddie said, I think his distribution has been very, very good this season. And from my perspective, I can't criticize him on that. He was also asked by Jacob about Jacob Murphy coming off. He said, I don't think I've ever seen someone smiling like that. He says when he was substituted. He just wanted an explanation behind it. And he said, look, Jacob, understood the situation. Bruno had been sent off. We changed to 5 at the back, 3 in midfield. And he says, Jacob's a really nice guy. He's got a good level of intelligence, and he understood why we were doing it. He says, and the reaction didn't surprise me in the slightest. He says, it's of a pure team player and of a very positive guy. So, again, he couldn't big up Jacob Murphy any more than that. Luke Edwards sneaked back in with one more question before the end of the press conference, and he just said, look, Trippier, he's one player that's experienced, getting to a final. How important will that be in the weeks ahead? And he said, very, very important. He said, because Kieran brings a level of calm and authority. And when he speaks to everyone, he says it's very powerful in the dressing room. He says, I didn't hesitate when, the opportunity, came up for us to sign him. He just won the league. And, for us to sign a player like that, to sign a league winner, was very, very important. So, ultimately, delighted with Trippier, and realizes the huge potential that he has, to help players around him. I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. So a good press conference, as all Eddies are, and obviously the press conference was about a game which takes place today, and Toon Stato, who features, of course, on the Three Amigos, had this to say last night.
Hi all, the Cup is coming home soon. Newcastle made it only to their second League Cup final during the week, and first time since 1976 we are heading to Wembley to play in the Carabao Cup final. West Ham on Saturday. Actually, Newcastle have trailed only for 80 minutes the entire season, the least out of any team in the Premier League. When I think about it, it was Wolverhampton and Manchester City that led against us for the entire season. When it comes to West Ham, they won last season 4-2 at St. James's Park. The last time that they won 2 consecutive games at St. James's was back in '98. At the same time, in the last 6 games, Newcastle have won 3, drawn 2 and lost 1. And we have scored in all of them. The last time that we didn't score against West Ham in the entire season was in 2018-2019. Nick Pope has 6 consecutive clean sheets in the Premier League. No other English goalkeeper has ever made 7 clean sheets in a row. We are without Bruno Guimaraes, as you all know. West Ham are also missing some key players. I looked into Newcastle results after the last 2 times that we made it to Wembley. In '98, after beating Sheffield United in the semi-final, we lost at Highbury away to Arsenal 3-1, Warren Barton scoring for us. The next season, after beating Tottenham at Old Trafford and making it to Wembley, we lost at home to Everton by 3-1. Shearer scored a penalty and missed a penalty in the same game. Let's hope things change this time. Away the lads. By the way, this cup is from a quiz on English football that the Newcastle United Bulgaria supporters won this week. Cheers.
Thanks as always to Andrea. So Newcastle United take on West Ham today. David Moyes brings the Hammers to St James's Park for a 5:30 kickoff, and it is live on Sky Sports. No tickets available. Another sellout at SJP. First time we'll have played West Ham this season, because obviously the first game was postponed in September, and this completes Newcastle facing every team in the league so far this season. Team news: Anthony Gordon's in line for a debut. Harrison Ashby might also be involved as well. Gordon wears number 8. Ashby takes number 30. Injuries: well, Matt Targett may well be back on the training pitch, but this game comes too soon for him. Javier Manquillo, as I've already mentioned, is sidelined as well. Bruno starts his 3-match suspension. Of course, we know he will be back for the final. Still unclear whether Alexander Isak will be available. My money would say not. As for West Ham, Kurt Zuma, Gianluca Scamacca and Maxwell Cornet are all out. And Danny Ings could yet return from injury. Monday saw West Ham win at Derby County by 2-0 in the FA Cup. But the Hammers aren't good travellers. They may well have hit a little bit of good form in recent weeks, but they've only got 5 out of a possible 30 points on the road. They won at Aston Villa and they had 2 draws at Southampton and at Leeds. Not prolific scorers on the road either, as you would imagine with that kind of points tally. 6 goals they've scored and 2 of those penalties. Referee today, Peter Banks, which is his second game in charge of a Newcastle fixture. The first was the 1-1 draw back at Wolves in August. And on VAR is Neil Swarbrick. Pre-match entertainment, well, you can go and see Supermac at the Dog and Parrot at 3:30 this afternoon. He will be back at 8 o'clock after the game. And it's John Gibson and John Anderson down at Pumphrey's. That's at 3:30 today. Food Bank, of course, is, as always, opposite the ground, opposite Shearer's. Get yourself up there. See the bucket shakers. Stick your money in. And don't forget, any money going into the buckets today, thanks to the Newcastle's director, Jamie Rubin, he's continuing his pledge to double all cash donations made on home fixtures. So well worth going and sticking some money into the bag today. I'll just jump into the chat. I did go for a 2-0 prediction last night. I'll just have a quick shift through here before I finish. What's the latest on Isak, Tom? Again, nothing, as Tom Lynch says. He is very cagey, bugger, and we'll not find out until 4:30 whether he's playing or not. Chaz Young, good morning, says keeps his cards close to his chest, does Eddie. Kevin Hawthorne, good to see you back in the chat, mate. Good morning from Lakeland, Florida. David John Cook, good to see you, mate, in the chat. I hope things are okay. I know you've had a tough time in your personal life over the last few weeks. Just been listening to the press conference, says Keith, we love Eddie Howe. Good morning, Ray. He says, morning, Cult. Hope you're all right, Mr. Anderson. I hope you're okay, mate. David John Cook says, speaking about Gordon, obviously the reports about him driving while banned hasn't come to light at that point. If the paper reports are true, it's not good. Yeah, I've seen the paper. It was the Sun, of course, which photographed him reversing his car by the looks of it. Look, there's a protocol set after what happened with Joe Linton. Gordon will be in the squad today. There is no doubt about that. It's not the great train robbery he's committed. It's not good what he's done, of course. He's banned. But I guess we'll wait and see. And that story will probably develop over the course of the next week. Yeah, David says it's reported in the Sun and Mirror, 6-month ban for not providing details of driver in his car, then photographed behind the wheel at the Hilton. I mean, he may well just be reversing the car, but he shouldn't be doing it. Exactly. But I don't think it's going to be a major issue, that, and I don't expect him not to be in the squad today. Ray says, I think it might be a tight game today. Can't see the Hammer scoring, going for 1-0 Wilson. I'm going to go 2-0. I'm slightly more optimistic. Maybe just a paper agenda, but can carry a prison sentence. He's not going to go to jail for that, mate. Not in the slightest. Definitely not. 2-0, says Chaz Young. And I liked Ashby's interview. He's got plenty of confidence. Hope he reaches his potential and learns from trips, says Ray. Chaz says, on the note of press conference, I wish they would sort out mics for reporters. Yeah. It's I know what you mean. Sometimes you can't hear them. I sometimes have to rewind it to find out who's asking the question. It's why I started doing this as well, because it's sometimes just nice to have a chat about it and see what people think. Barry says, Steve, I know we didn't talk too much about Joe Linton's driving. It's now been mentioned that Gordon has been done in the last week and could potentially face jail time. Yeah, it's highly unlikely that. Just the paper's trying to stir things up. Chelsea are a second division outfit that won the Russian lottery, says Sean. Real life calls. Have a good day, guys. How are the two tonight? Chaz Young, have a good day, mate. Agree about the mics, Chaz. It's difficult to hear the questions. Yeah. The answers are interesting, but you have to guess what the questions are, says Graham. It's like a game. Geordie Jedi. Normally we miss his goals when he's out injured. At least he is playing. Amigos last night spoke about Qatar Air being a potential sponsor. Imagine the narrative of the press if that one happens. Yeah, it's well worth discussing that maybe again, I think, in the future. Convinced Elliot Anderson needs a run of games to shine, much like Longstaff, says Les. Good morning, Les. And anybody else got anything? Steve, you predicted we would lose Bruno for 3 games due to his reactions. I did, mate, yeah. I over the last few weeks, he's looked out of control at times, Barry. So I'm gutted I was right, but hopefully this gives him an opportunity to screw his loaf on and get things right. 2 spaces to bring Kraft and Gillespie back into the 25. Noticed him on the pitch with the keepers warming them up before the matches. Good that he remained involved even when he wasn't in the 25. Yeah, he's a Geordie, mate. He's a Geordie lad, Gillespie. He'll be loving every minute of this. I saw Eddie mouth 6 sub concussion when 6 sub came on, so protocol is 7 days off. 100%, mate. I can't see him featuring today. Just got to accept that. Derek, morning. He says, we'll beat West Ham. Tom Dixon says 2-0. John fancies 4-0. Get well soon, John. I know you're not too well today. Thanks for the shout out. Not a problem, David. I hope everything is okay with you. Ups and downs in that kind of situation, I can only imagine. The press conferences are so much better than the dark days of Bruce. 2-1, Wilson and Joe Linton. Good morning, Jimmy. Cruels to be kind. The sun. Exactly. See no more. I hope you're feeling okay, David. Said JC, says Les. Anything else of interest? Tom says, wonder if ASM will play today or would he play Anderson? ASM for me, mate, 100%. Big Billy, hope you're well, son. Have a good weekend. All right, I'm back with the professionals tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Me, Stu Penman and Mitch. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great Saturday. Let's hope Newcastle do the business once again. I am going to play out with the ads. Take care. Thanks, as always, to our sponsors, Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at mrvickies.co.uk, email info@mrvickies.co.uk, or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to Blowhole Brewery. You can find them at blowholebrewery.co.uk. Beers brewed on the River Tyne. And thanks to United Group Travel Limited, UK Coach Holidays, based in Morpeth, telephone 01670 362 460 and mobile 07957 141 654. Graham, your driver, Beverly answering your calls, looking after you on your tour. Thanks also to 3 Property, who specialise in sourcing investment properties for their clients who are looking to invest in the North East. They offer a full in-house service from sourcing the deals to managing the properties for you. They've done over 100 plus deals in the past 12 months for clients all over the UK. Give the guys a follow on Instagram, matty.patter_northeast property and phil.reed_northeast property, or email phil@3property.co.uk if you're interested in getting a good property deal. Thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wales and Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, nufcmatters.com. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the videos and the technology side of things. If you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button underneath the video today. Hit the thumb up to like the channel and click share to your social media. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest. If you want to become a member, you pay a £25 one-off fee, and you can go to the website, nufcmatters.com, and find membership pack, or put your smartphone over the QR code, and it will take you straight there. If you subscribe, we do give you a free car sticker. All you need to do is email john@nufcmatters.com, and he'll post you one out. We also support the food bank on this channel, nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. You'll find the match day bucket where you can make a virtual donation. We've also got some events coming up over the next couple of months. First off, we've got an evening with Steve Howe at the Tyneside Irish Centre, Friday the 24th of February. Tickets are available from our website, nufcmatters.com, and they are priced £15, not $50, as you can see on the poster. An evening with Nobby Solano is also at the Tyneside Irish Centre, Saturday the 25th of March. Tickets are £15. Book now at NUFCmatters.com. And an evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson, Thursday the 20th of April, again at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £15 and you book now at NUFCmatters.com. Supermac and John Gibson will also be at Felon Cricket Club on the 16th of February. To buy tickets for that, contact the venue direct. We've got a whole host of t-shirts available from our website, NUFCmatters.com. Gives you plenty of ideas for presents, for birthdays, anniversaries, you name it. Get your Anthony Gordon t-shirts and your Wembley t-shirts today.